All right, good afternoon.
Hello.
Cool. Welcome back. Welcome back. Um, this week, we're going to jump right into it. You guys, hopefully, um, figured out a way to take some photos during the week. Um, you had the Light City project, um, and, we went over using the camera last week. But so hopefully this week you did some experimentation, you tried your hand at setting up a still life, shooting some shots, readjusting the settings, etc. Um, and this week we're going to go into, okay, what do you do with the photos once you shot them? It's important that we understand this process. So just so you know, this week we are going to need you to have Lightroom Classic on your computer. I'll go ahead and share my screen, show you what that icon looks like. 1 second. And the other program that we also will want to have is, and I'm not sure, actually, I don't remember if I mentioned this one, but it should not be a difficult one to download for you guys, is Adobe Bridge. Now, if I didn't mention Adobe Bridge last time, that's my fault, but I'll show you the icon here as well. Okay. Oh, sick. Okay. So two programs we're going to be looking into today. One's called Adobe Bridge. The icon for in your Creative Cloud is BR. So I just open the Creative Cloud application so you can see this. Right here, Adobe Bridge. So you want to download that. So you can, if you don't have it, you can go ahead and click download right now, and then that can be running in the background while I go over a few different things. And then the second program that we're going to need is this one here, Lightroom Classic. So the logo says LRC as in classic, Lightroom Classic. Those are two programs we'll need today. Oh, actually, we'll need a third. I forgot at the very end of the process, we're going to need Adobe Acrobat DC. So if you haven't downloaded those two, go ahead and hit those for download, get those downloading. And then, they can be downloading in the background and we can come back to it.
I have a question.
Yes.
I've been downloading Lightroom for more than an hour now, and it still says waiting. Um, should I be able to download two apps at the same time or not really? Because I'm downloading two at the same time.
The programs are fairly big. What I would do is you can always come to while the download is going, and you can come here and potentially stop it and only download one. But the programs are fairly big, and it all depends on your internet speeds. So Um, yeah, if you don't seem like there's any movement, another option is potentially just quitting Creative Cloud, and then once you quit Creative Cloud, reopen Creative Cloud, and then see if that like kickstarts it, or jump starts it. But the programs are fairly big, so they do take a little bit to download, but I think an hour sounds like a lot, so there might be something that's held up.
Okay, I'll like try to quit
Mhm.
the app and do it again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's the programs that we need. The other thing is like, so you guys shot some photos, and so I'm going to go through a process today, and the process has some steps in the process, and it's important that we remember the steps in the process, right? And the more rigid you are with remembering these steps in the process, then the easier it will be for you to remember it, because you're going to do it over and over and over again. I will say that there are many ways to do this process. I'm showing you guys one way. I'm showing you the way that I use in my process, the way that makes sense to my flow. And so the important thing is, with everything in photography class this quarter, there are other ways to do the things that we're doing potentially. We're learning one particular way in what I've kind of distilled as the simplest way to grasp the basic concepts of what we're doing, so that you can understand the basic rules or the basic techniques or flows. And then you can get good at it. And once it becomes kind of like second nature, then you can start to adjust or start to move things around in the way you do it. Okay. So the very first thing is I'm going to point out is what is a file, and then we're going to go from there. So we're going to go from the most basic point of looking at files to then we'll go into, okay, how do we move files or copy them to a different location? And then once we have them at a location, what do we do with them after that? Okay, so the first things first is that when you take a photo on your camera, you save it to a storage device. That storage device looks like this. It's an SD card. And when you save it to that storage device, based on the size of the storage device is how many photos you can fit onto this card. Now, I know that the type of photos that you're taking or the type of cameras you're using is gonna, for every photo, each photo is somewhere around 25 megabytes. 25 megabytes per one file. Now, I remember the first day of class, I went through the scale of how file size grows. And so you keep adding up 25 megabytes a piece, eventually you're going to hit a gigabyte. Does anybody remember around how many megabytes is in a gigabyte? It's an approximate number. How many megabytes is in a gigabyte?
1,000.
1,000, approximately. And so we can fit, if you just wanted to do some math, if one photo is 25 megabytes and there's 1,000 megabytes in a gigabyte, then you can determine how many photos you'd be able to fit within a gigabyte, right? That's just pretty straightforward. So yeah, that's kind of how it is. I have a card here that's 128 gigabytes. That's how many, based on the sizes of the photos, that's how many photos this will hold until it's full. So that's at the most basic level. The photos you are taking hold information, and that information has a certain file size, and those files translate to wherever you're storing them. So storage is not infinite. Storage is storage has a finite amount. The other thing is you're creating a certain type of file. Now, I also mentioned in the first week of class, when you're writing file names out, they end with something. Does anybody remember the name of what comes after the period in a file name?
Is it how you saved it? Like as
Yeah,
an
it's going to be
image
determined
or?
by how you saved it or what program you used to save it or things like that, or program you used to create it. But there's actually a name for that piece of the file name. There's a way to describe it.
The file extension?
The file extension. So the file extension are things like .jpeg, .png, .pdf, .psd. The file extension holds a lot of information. The file extension tells the computer what program either created the file or what program is needed to open the file. Now we have universal file extensions, meaning file extensions that can be opened on any device. Over time, developers and hardware creators have decided that certain files should be able to be opened on every device, no matter what application or program that you have. And so files become generally universal. File types that are generally universal that you're used to are .jpeg files, .gif files, .png files. These are generally universal files, meaning you don't need any special type of software to open the files. You can email them, text them, and generally open them on any computer or device with a screen. It wasn't always this way, but it's grown to be this way. Now, Adobe Acrobat creates a certain file type that has a different file extension. Does anybody know the file extension for Adobe Acrobat?
PDF?
.pdf. Acrobat files are what we call like enhanced universal files. Over time, the Adobe Acrobat format, the Adobe Acrobat PDF format, has been adopted by software and other applications. Now, you can text it, if you're iMessaging, you can text a PDF. You can email a PDF. You can open a PDF generally, usually either Acrobat or some type of program that can open an Acrobat file is by default installed on whatever device you're using. Over time, Acrobat files have also become fairly universal. Now you can open, you can open an Acrobat file in Adobe, and that will, be specific to that file. But then even in internet browsers, Chrome, Safari, Firefox, Explorer, they come now built with an Adobe Acrobat extension, meaning you can open the Acrobat file within the browser. So file extensions are powerful, and different file types do different things. We have another set of file types. So universal file types is one set of file types. We have JPEG, PNG. The best way to think about it is a universal file type is easily shared amongst different devices and amongst different expertise levels or user levels of the device. But now we have a different file type, and oftentimes this file type is described as, say, an art file or an uncompressed file, or in terms of photography, a RAW file, R-A-W. Now, you guys might have noticed when maybe you did plug in your card to your computer, there's a file extension potentially, because those cameras, if you're using the school cameras, have been set to shoot the files and create this type of file, a RAW file. Did anybody already plug their memory card into the computer and see the file extension that exists on the files for the photos that you shot? Did anybody do that? Did anybody see that? It's okay if no one did. I'm just asking just to see. Okay. So this is where we're going to start. The files potentially that your camera created, or if it didn't, we're going to set your camera to shoot or create in this file type, is considered a camera RAW file. What a RAW file does, or an uncompressed file, to compare it to files that you might be familiar with, like a Photoshop file. When you develop a Photoshop file and you create multiple layers, you can edit those layers, turn them on and off within Photoshop, add filters, add colors, adjustments, and those type of things. And you can save that Photoshop file. And next time you open it, all the things you did are still there, the layers, the pieces to the puzzle. But it'd be really hard to send that Photoshop file to someone who doesn't have Photoshop. They would not be able to open it. You would need to export or process that file into a shareable file type, like a JPEG or PDF, so that then they can see what you did. However, once you do that, you can no longer access the individual pieces to the puzzle or parts of that Photoshop file. A camera RAW file is very similar. When we take photos, we have different pieces or parts to the puzzle of a photo. There's color information, highlight, shadows, darks, texture, hue, white balance. There's all these different things that exist within a photo. But when it's compressed or made small. Think of a trash compactor compressing things down. Not trash compactor, but like at a junkyard when they squish cars together and squish trash into squares. That's basically what happens when you make a JPEG. You squish all the information into one smaller, concise piece. It takes up less space. However, it's hard to pull out the individual pieces once it's compacted. That's a JPEG. So what a camera raw file does is take all that information and packs it together, but however, each individual piece to the puzzle is still available to kind of pull out. What are these individual pieces? Like I said, color, hue, saturation, contrast, blacks, whites, darks, shadow, highlights. They're all in one little package, one file, but it's still, you still have the ability, if you have the right program, to open it and access these individual pieces of the shot. Now, based on that explanation, can anybody guess why that's valuable when you're shooting photos? Why would it be valuable to be able to access the individual pieces of a photo, like highlights, dark shadows, textures, color, hue, white balance, those type of things? Why would that be valuable?
So you can change it individually?
So you can change it individually. So you could edit your photo, enhance it, make it better. Maybe it wasn't exactly the way you wanted to shoot it when you did shoot it. So raw files, camera raw files, give you a greater ability to do that. JPEGs, you can kind of do it, but some things are very compressed together, okay? So we're going to learn to shoot in raw files, but the problem is that a raw file is not really shareable. You need specialty programs to open a camera raw file, just like you need Photoshop to open a Photoshop file. And so we want to be able to, there is a process of getting our raw files, sorting them, organizing them, picking the best ones, making whatever adjustments we need, and then exporting them to a proper shareable file type. So if you guys haven't heard the word export before, you might have come across it. That is the process of going from an uncompressed, non-shareable file to a different file type, exporting. Saving does this too in some programs. They use save for the nomenclature. Photoshop uses save, and then you save as, and you select the file type you want to save it as. But that's essentially what we're going to do. So the program that we're going to use to open, read, organize our raw files, and then export them into more shareable file types is called Lightroom. This is very similar to like if we were shooting on a film camera. That roll of film is no good to anybody, but you have to take that roll of film into, ironically, and not ironically, they named the program off of this process, but you have to take your film into a dark room. So to process it and develop it. Think of Lightroom as your digital dark room. This is where you're going to process and develop your raw files. Lightroom also works with JPEGs. You can load JPEGs into Lightroom as well, and still try to access some manipulation and ability to enhance or edit the photos in Lightroom as well. But Lightroom does that really well, but it also does organization really well. So Lightroom Organize, it's an organization program. I just shot a wedding, and the wedding was a 12-hour wedding. During that wedding, I think I've ingested over maybe 3,500 to 4,000 photos into my computer. Now, all of those photos are named with random numbers, RGA332456, and so on and so forth in a sequence. It's really difficult to keep track of all those files. Imagine if I just dropped all those files on my desktop. 4,000 photos. There's no way for me to then organize and actually sift through those photos to pick the best ones and select the best ones. So Lightroom is a really great program that allows you to do that. The other thing is these photos are really big. Now, I don't know if you've now ever tried to open a really big file on your computer, a really big Photoshop file. And then if you're using a Mac computer, you get the spinning pinwheel of death. If you're using a PC computer, you get the little hourglass or the little Windows thing that just keeps going. What happens is the bigger the file, the more resources it takes, or the more power it takes from your computer to open it. And the more number of files you have open at once, the more power it takes for the computer, it takes from that computer. Think of it like if you have a box and one box weighs 25 pounds, but then if you try to, you can lift 25, all right. But then you add another one and you're like, okay, this is getting heavier. Not only has the shape of it got more awkward, but now you're lifting more weight and so on and so forth. Eventually they got more difficult. It takes more of your energy to lift the weight of the files, but also the number of them, the number of the boxes. Your computer's kind of similar. So if you ever hear your fan just blaring and going really loud, your computer's doing a lot of work. Maybe close some applications or close some programs to give it a chance to breathe. Now, imagine if I tried to open 4,000 photos all at once after just explaining that to you. On our scale of file size, I'm just letting you know that raw files are considered pretty large images for image files. They're very big. And so opening 4,000 very big files can create some problems. So how do we do this? How do we get through 4,000 files in a timely manner? How do we even look at that many photos and even preview that many photos? That's where Lightroom comes in. Lightroom does that really well, okay? And so this is what we're gonna do. So I wanted to explain that because if you've never been in the ecosystem or you've never been in this world of dealing with this many files or this type of file, it can kind of seem like not making too much sense because you're like, why don't I just double click it and open the file? Or why don't I just open it up on my computer? And there's limitations and reasons why that doesn't really work the best, okay? All right, so you got your memory card here, and let me just check and make sure the memory card I have on my computer has some photos on it that I can go through with you guys. 1 second. Yeah, I think this will be fine. So you have your memory card here, and I have on my computer, I have an adapter that allows me to put this memory card into my computer. Older computers might actually have this slot on their computer. The newest Macs, they put it back. They took it away, but they put it back. And so however you connect this to your computer, you need to connect that to your computer. When you do, your computer might prompt you, depending on what software you have loaded onto your computer, it might say something like, my computer just did, oh, do you want to save all these photos to Dropbox? Or Lightroom might open up and prompt me to do something. Software and operating systems love to automatically try to guess what you want to do. Just like we set our camera on manual, we want to manually control this process. So whatever windows pop up when you plug your memory card in, even if it's Lightroom, close them. That's just a rule of thumb, because you can get lost in the process. And so as we're learning this, I want you to be in control of every step of the process. So the first step in the process is take your memory card out of your camera, plug it into your computer. Real simple. First step, plug it into your computer. And if you guys want to follow along, if you have photos, if you were able to shoot, if you have a memory card, if you have a way to plug into your computer, follow along so that you can, and take notes so that you can reference this back. I always do this. I always put this lecture, this part of the class, I record it and I put it back online so you can come back and reference it. But follow along to the best of your ability. I have to keep going at this pace because just the time constriction, like I won't be able to get it all in before we finish class. So I apologize ahead of time if I'm going kind of fast. Okay, so once we plug the computer in, the memory card in, you might, on my computer, I get this little icon. And let me make I'll just make my resolution a little bit bigger so that you guys can see what I got going on here. 1 second. Okay. All right. So this is my icon for my memory card here. It's called Untitled. Memory card's not named anything. And then I have other things on my desktop. The orange drives are like external drives that I have plugged into my computer. If you have a Windows computer, this might look slightly different for you. Now, on that note, I'm going to use a program that looks the same on Windows or Mac, and that program is called Adobe Bridge. I'm doing this for the first time so that I can show you in the same manner, and I don't have to like show two different ways. But just know that Windows computers and Mac computers both have their built-in default versions of Adobe Bridge. They are the applications that are on your computer that allow you to see your computer. So when you click on it, you see the files on your computer. For those of you that have a Mac, does anybody know what, sorry, let me just put it on a separate window. This is called, this window, with the left-hand side bar of desktop, pictures, documents. This is a program that comes with every Mac computer, and you really can't use your computer without it. Does anybody know what it's called?
Finder.
Finder, yep. Does anybody know what the version of this, I don't know if we have any Windows users on the call, in the class right now, but does anybody know what version of this, the Windows version of Finder is called? It starts with the letter E. So some of you have your camera off, so I don't know if you have Windows or not, but it's called Explorer, okay? And sometimes you click it by clicking the start button, or you get to it by clicking the little folder button, the little manila folder icon, depending on the versions of Windows that you have. That's called Explorer. These two default applications, you don't install them yourself. It's like when you open the computer, they're there, allow you to access your hard drive on your computer. You can access the files, the default files that come with the computer, like the operating system itself, which is what you see, and the files you put on it, applications you install like Photoshop, Illustrator, or files you downloaded from the internet. That is what this is the way you navigate it. It is your window, thus the name Windows. They had a reason for naming it that, to your computer, to your hard drive. Okay, now, everything we're doing here in this process, you can do through your default application, Windows, Finder, or Explorer. I'm going to show you an Adobe Bridge. It's Adobe's version of these type of applications where it lets you see your computer. The reason why I'm going to show you Adobe Bridge is because it looks the same on every single computer, okay? No matter what your operating system. So let me open up Adobe Bridge. If it's the first time you're opening, you might get this little progress bar. Okay, finally got Adobe Bridge open, worth waiting on. It might pop up with new, with a little preview thing. But when Adobe Bridge is open, we kind of have a similar layout. On the left-hand side, I have some quick locations on my computer, like my desktop, my documents, my pictures. These are quick, generally defined locations that you generally might have some stuff somewhere. So they just put them there to make it easier that you can just jump to it. Okay. And then in the middle, I see what's at that location. And then on the third column is like extra stuff. We don't really need the third column right now, so I'm actually going to close the third column up real small. We're just going to pay attention to the left column and the center column here which shows us what our results are. So I just plugged in, we're going back to our goal right now. I just plugged in my memory card, and my goal is I want to access the files on the memory card. So what I need to do on the left-hand side is I need to find the memory card. Generally, the memory card is going to be located under an option called My Computer or Computer. And that's where you're going to see all the hard drives that are connected to your computer. Now, I have a lot of hard drives connected to my computer right now. It's kind of insane. I need to do some organization and file management, but I have a lot of external hard drives because I'm working on a lot of different projects. But amongst these drives is what I know to be my SD card, which is titled Untitled right here. So I can double click on my SD card and I can see the folders within that. Your Canon and most cameras create a folder called DCIM. When you take photos, you usually have a folder called DCIM. Inside of that folder, you're going to have another folder, and depending on the brand of your camera, Canon cameras will usually create a folder named Canon with some numbers after it. Sony's will create these folders with MSD, CF, and then Nikon will create a folder with maybe NEF or something like that. Inside of these folders is going to be photos, okay? And the photos are going to be numbered just simply based on the date. They're simply numbered based on it, or a sequence that you took these photos, okay? And I have some photos on my card here. But as you can see, when I double click and I go into the folder, I now see previews of my files. When it comes to Sony, actually better to say this, every brand of camera has a different camera raw file extension. Sony cameras, which is the camera I use, has .arw. Canon cameras has .cr2. So you'll see the file name plus the file extension, or .cr3, but right now I think all you guys are using Canon cameras that shoot .cr2s. Fuji shoots, what was Fuji again? REG, I think, if you're shooting RAW. But if your camera was not set to shoot RAW, you will see .jpeg. That's what will be there. And that's fine. We're fine. I didn't go through setting your camera to shoot RAW. It's fine. We're shooting JPEGs. That's fine if you see it. But I just want you to see that there'll be a file extension, there'll be a preview of your image, etc. Now, just to go to the interface of Bridge, another plus side to Bridge is that Bridge actually reads camera raw files really well. It's optimized for file types like this because it knows creatives are going to be using Bridge to organize their files. So I would say Bridge, if you open these files like this in Explorer or in potentially Finder, you're not going to see a preview. You might just see an icon, a little digital icon representing that raw file. It might say raw on it, or it might say CR2 on it, but you don't see the photo. You just see the file name. In this instance, we can see a photo, we can scroll, we can come down here and change the thumbnail size. And I can actually scroll through and the photos will load. We can change the view, the grid view, depending on what we want. And there's just other options here of how we view these particular files. Okay, so there's a lot of power in Adobe Bridge. We're not going to spend too much time here, but I just want to show you. It's like an enhanced version of Explorer and Finder. But you can do this exact same thing in Finder. Let me just open my Finder window and show you that. In my Finder window, which this is the Finder window that I've laid on top here, I have different views for Finder. Some of you might not know Finder has different views. This is the default view, thumbnail, but you can turn it into rows and columns. And so I like to use columns because I can see where I came from and I can see where I'm going. So up top here, rows, we have different views for Finder, and then you can change that out. I can do the same exact thing I just did in Bridge. I can find my memory card, which is here on the side, and here's the DCIM folder. And then after a second, it will load. And then I can find the folder with my raw files. Now, same thing, I have it here. But notice when I click on an image, a raw file, it takes a second to load. It's not loaded yet, still not loaded yet. We're 6 seconds in, 7 seconds, 8 seconds, 9 seconds to load one file. Times that by 4,000. That's a really slow process. It's because this file is really big. This file is double the size of the files that you guys are shooting. One photo here is 50 megabytes. It's a lot for the computer to process and for Finder to process. Finder is not optimized. But when I go to Bridge, notice how fast these photos loaded in Bridge. And I can see them. I can even change the thumbnail size very quickly. So it's just optimized for a faster review process. Okay. That being said, it's important that we get the photos from this flimsy piece of plastic onto something a little more substantial like this, because the plastic can break. Also, this plastic has no processing power. Like the amount of electricity that can run through this, you cannot edit off of this card. It's not meant to process things that you're doing. So we need to get them off of here and save them in a more secure place and a place that is more powerful that we can actually do something with it. So that's the first step in the process. First step, move your photos before you do anything. Before you open Lightroom, move your photos from your memory card to your storage device. Now, if you don't have an external hard drive, let that be your actual computer. But I'm going to move them to an external drive. And I want you to pay attention to the process that I do, because what we're going to do is we're going to basically file away these shots based on what it is. Okay. Now, folder structure is something that we want to implement in organizing our files. What is it for? When was it shot, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and define these things in these folders so that later you can go back and find them. So for example, right now, you guys are at FITM and you're taking a class. And in that class, you're going to be doing projects. That's how you decide your folder structure. The highest level folder, maybe on your desktop or on your hard drive, could either be FITM or could be BDSN 3700. That's the technical name for the class. Could be digital photography or something, whatever makes sense to you. Inside of that folder, we want to make another folder for the exact project that we're doing, because it's going to be multiple projects. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to build a folder structure. So I'm just going to make my thumbnails a little bit smaller, and I'm just going to grab some of the photos. I'm not going to grab all of them, it's going to take too long. I'm just going to imagine that this right here is my light study project. Now, all I did was click in the empty space and drag over the photos that I wanted to select. And I'm going to secondary click. I say secondary click because not everybody's using a mouse. So on a mouse, it's right click. On a trackpad, it's probably 2-finger click. And you might have the actual mouse buttons below the trackpad depending on the computer you're using. But the universal term for that is secondary click. What secondary click or right click does is it brings up menu options. So I'm going to secondary click on my selection of photos, just any of the photos that are selected. Notice my photos are still selected while this menu is popped up. If your photos deselect and you only have one photo selected, you kind of did it wrong. And you got to select the photos again and secondary click onto your shot. The next step in the process is that we want to copy our shots over to our storage device. So I'm going to go here in Bridge, and this is the great thing about Bridge is that this is the same process no matter what operating system you're using, Mac or PC. I'm going to go to copy to. I'm just going to hover over it. The little arrow, the little caret on the right-hand side designates that I have some more options. And then I'm going to go down to the bottom and say choose folder. That's going to open my default application, which in this instance is Finder. And now I'm gonna build my folder structure. So for me, I'm gonna find a place that I wanna put these photos. So I'm gonna come to one of my hard drives. Which one I wanna use? And then I'm gonna make a new folder. Actually, I haven't started it yet. 2022, this is just I always have this for when I start. I haven't started a new folder on this drive yet. And in this folder, I'm gonna make a new folder and I'm gonna call it FITM. I teach more than one FITM class, so it makes sense for me to do that. And then in the FITM folder, I'm gonna make a folder for digital photog. Now, I don't use spaces in my file names. It's a holdover from being a web developer. A space is actually in code %, 20%. Every time you put a space with a space bar. So I use dashes, and visually it helps me just read it a little bit better. I use dashes, so I'll just do digital photog for this folder inside of FITM. And then in this folder, I'm gonna make a folder that makes sense to me. And so the folder name that makes sense to me is Lightroom Demo 2022. Actually, I'll do more specific, Winter 22. Okay, so you guys are making this folder right now. If you are, you'll name it. These photos that we're trying to move, it's called Light Study. That's the name of the project, Light Study, right? So I'll go ahead and hit create. Now that's the folder where I want to put my files. There's one more folder that I want you to make in this process, and that folder is for the type of files that we're moving here. Now, all of you might not have shot in the raw file type, but that's okay. In this instance, I'm moving raw files over. So I'm gonna make one more folder called raw, because within my project folder, I'm gonna have other files within this folder by the time we're done. So I want everything to be nice and organized. All right, just to show you the flow of the folders that I made. I'm still in Adobe Bridge, and every time I just hit new folder every time, one after the other. So FITM, digital photog, Lightroom Demo, Winter 2022. Your guys will be based on the name of the project. In this instance, the project you guys are working on is called Light Study. And then the last folder in that process is raw, because it is the files before we did anything. It's the files before we touch them in Lightroom. So you can still name this folder raw even if you have JPEGs, because it's the unedited, unprocessed, unorganized files. All right, and then you're gonna hit this button down here that says open. You'll get a progress bar and your files will be copying over. Once this is done, then we go to Lightroom. But this is the first step. So that's why I said, like, when you plug your memory card in and any windows that pop up, close them. Because if you go to Lightroom first, before this process, it can get confusing, and you can drag the files directly from your memory card or do some other stuff where it's really hard to track down. And then, so you want to make sure you do this step first in the process. All right, cool. Things are copied. I'm just gonna minimize Adobe Bridge and Finder. Just gonna minimize it. Now, I'm gonna close Lightroom just so we get like the basic process down. Now, when you guys open Lightroom, you're not gonna have anything in the middle column. It's probably gonna be empty because you have not ingested any photos or files to your Lightroom yet. I want you to think of your Lightroom as your own personal library, because it is. It's your own personal library of your photos and your files. Each library has a unique set of photos, right? Each library has a unique set of physical books, if you think of a physical library, right? So your Lightroom has a unique set of individual photos. So Lightrooms don't transfer per device. If you set up a set of photos on one device and then you go to another device, those photos aren't going to be on that other device, even though you open Lightroom on the other device. It's very specific. It's just like a regular library. Does anybody know what a regular library has so that you can find the books within the library? Does anybody know what it's called? The mechanism to help you find the books in the library?
The Dewey Decimal System?
So that's the number system, yeah. But there's like a physical thing that you use, that you sift through to find the books. Has little pieces of paper where the Dewey Decimal number is written on, the title of the book is written on it, the IBSN number is written on it, the row is written on it, the aisle is written on it, the category of books is written on it. What are you gonna say, Joey?
I said ledger, but I'm assuming that's a no.
Okay. When you spend a little more time in the library, anybody heard the term card catalog? Or is that completely foreign?
Yeah, no, I've heard it before.
All right. Well, the question is if we've ever used it. I understand that that's a whole other thing. But the card catalog is referencing the collection of books. It's usually at the front of the library. Now card catalogs are oftentimes digital. You sit down to the computer, type in the title of your book. It reads you back, go to row 2, aisle 8 in fiction. And then you go there and you look for the title of your book. The card catalog is the way you organize the assets within the library. And every library is different. Fidham's library is different than LA County Library down the street on and the Hope. So you can't have the same catalog either. They don't reference each other, correct? Like it wouldn't make sense to take the reference that you found in the LA County Library and bring it to Fidham Library and try to find a book. It's just different. Lightroom is the same way. So each one of us on this call are going to have a unique Lightroom catalog. It's unique to you. And that catalog is created the moment you open Lightroom. You double click, you open it, catalog's been created. Boom. In my catalog, I have thousands of photos. In your guys' catalog right now, you're probably starting at 0. So it's going to look a little bit different. It's going to look empty. But for that reason, it's important to note catalogs don't transfer. Like you can't work on Lightroom at home and expect to be able to pick up where you left off on your computer. I mean at school or at home and vice versa. Now, the card catalog is built on something called a referencing system. You reference in one location something that's in another location, and it helps you get there. But in a physical library, you got to go from the computer or the card catalog and walk to the actual place where the book is and get it. That referencing is the same thing Lightroom does. So when we open Lightroom, it's going to ask us to reference the location of the information we want to open. Now, we just put our files in a location. We just did it. We just moved them onto the shelves. In this case, into the folders that I created. We need to open Lightroom and tell it where we put our stuff. Where's the stuff? What do you want me to open? That's what Lightroom's doing. It's like, what do you want me to open? What do you want me to reference? So we open Lightroom. And I'll open it up here. Lightroom Classic, you see a little intro screen, and then you guys will see a window that looks similar to this. However, there should be nothing in the middle. I have a bunch of stuff because there's a bunch of photos in the middle. But after the tour windows, and you can close the tour because I'm about to give you the tour, you will see a left column, a center column, and a right column. If you don't see these three columns, they might be collapsed. And there's little tiny triangles on either side of your window that can uncollapse, can open or collapse the columns. This goes for the same thing on the top and the bottom, okay? The interface is very similar to Adobe Bridge. It's also pretty similar to a lot of Adobe products in general, so it helps you kind of navigate around. So what we're gonna do is, in this step of the process, is that we're gonna find our photos where we saved them previously and tell Lightroom where they are. Just like somebody walking into a library and trying to look for a book. The only difference is that Lightroom, in this instance, has some special abilities. It can actually show us the files without opening the files. Now, I talked earlier about how much resources and stress it would put on your computer to open 4,000 large files. I have those 4,000 files open here, or actually 5,600, and my computer's not exploding. And so what Lightroom is doing is that it's showing me a workable reference or a workable preview of the files without actually walking across the library, picking up the file and opening it. Let's just say that Lightroom went to Hogwarts and learned some magic. There's a lot more technical way to describe that, but we don't need to get into the weeds. Just know it's using a process in computing called the referencing. Other applications that do this are applications like InDesign, if you ever use InDesign, Adobe Illustrator for raster graphics, where when you save the file, all the pieces aren't saved in the file. It helps you open large files. Okay, so, but in order for it to show me the preview of the file that I can work with and I can manipulate and I can organize, I need to tell it something. I need to tell it where it is. And so that's what we're going to do. And that's the next step in the process. So the first step in the process was taking the file from your camera to your hard drive. The next step in the process is to tell Lightroom where you just put your photos. Now, in Library, it's right here at the top. At the top, you're going to see Library, Develop, Map, Book, Slideshow, Print, and Web. The first one to the left is the word library. When you click on the word library, right here at the top, library, down at the bottom in your left column is going to be the word import. Now, don't click it yet. I want you to close a couple things. I want you to make sure you close the word catalog and close the word folders. Also close the word publish services. Close catalog, close folders, and close publish services. And then make a note of it. Don't touch catalog, don't touch folders, and don't touch publish services. Just don't touch them. Just leave them alone. We won't use them in this class. The only thing you're going to use is collections, and I'll explain collections here during the import process. Okay. So we're going to hit the button import, and it's going to open another window. Now, the thing about Lightroom, it can be a little confusing. This window looks almost exactly the same. So if you're not really paying attention to your steps in the process, you can get confused and be like, wait, what happened? Where am I? It's the same thing. It's different. So what I want you to do is limit your clicking. Like, don't get too over, I call it click happy. Go slow so that you can track your process. I clicked import once, I let it think, and it opened this window. This is a different window. On the left-hand side, there is a readout of the hard drives connected to my computer. I want to find the location, the new location where I copied my photos to, my raw files. So I'm going to open the hard drive, which I copied it to. Then I'm going to open the folder where I copied it. And notice I dwindled down eventually to this raw folder. Now, this raw folder has all those photos, whatever I selected. I selected a bunch of photos from that folder, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to add them to a collection. And it's on the right-hand side here under file handling. By default, they're all selected. So I selected my folder and then they're all selected. You can see that by the check marks, right? The good thing is I don't really need to sift through here and see which ones are which because I already know that the only files in this folder are for this project. So I'm going to come over to the right-hand side and click file handling. And I'm going to click add to collection. I have a bunch of collections here. Now, let me take a pause to explain why there's so many collections here. This is one wedding that I shot, 5,000 files. I've been shooting photography for over 10 years. I have loaded into my personal Lightroom library almost 200,000 photos. If I didn't organize every time I imported information into Lightroom, I would get lost. So I name and organize the reference information into a location within Lightroom. These organizations are not referencing what I did previously on my hard drive. This is just contained within Lightroom. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to add a collection. I'm going to hit the plus button and I'm going to name my collection. What I am going to do is name it very similar or exactly the same thing as the folder that I named for this. So I'm going to say Lightroom Demo Winter 22. I'm not going to put it in a collection set. And I'm not going to sync with Lightroom. Syncing has to do with Adobe Cloud, and it can take a really long time to sync these large files and takes up a lot of space. So I'm just going to say Lightroom Demo Winter 2022, hit create. What that's done is it's created a collection. So this information, this reference information is going to go into this organization within Lightroom. It's not that big of a deal when you only have a few photos, but like I said, very quickly, this can grow and grow and grow and grow, and you want to have this organization. The good thing is you can always go back if you forget to do this. You can go back and do this. You can create a collection, okay? I want to stress that I'm saying the word collection and not catalog. Catalog is the thing we're not touching. Collections is the thing that you want to make new ones of every time you run a different import. Collections. Catalog, no. So write the word catalog, put a big X through it. That's not what you want to do. Collections is the thing you want to make a new one of every time you run an import. All right. 10 more minutes and we'll take a quick break. So once I have the collection made specifically for this instance of my shooting, I'm going to hit the word import. You're going to see a progress bar at the top left. Lightroom puts all its progress bars in the top left, depending on the speed of your computer, depends on how fast you're importing, and depending on how many photos you're importing. Okay. So let's go over what we are looking at here. I have my list of collections here on the left-hand side, collections. I have my view of this currently selected collection here in the middle. And I'm still in the library view, by the way. And I have just some buttons on the right-hand side. We're not gonna mess with these in the library view. Down at the bottom, I have what's called my film strip. This allows you to toggle left and right with your arrows on your keyboard between the photos within the collection. I can view my library in a grid view. I can view it in single view. And then there's some other comparison views here that we're not going to mess with right now. But that's down, the film strip is down at the bottom. Just above the film strip, I have some information. Now I'm going to warn you, Lightroom likes to do things really small. So it's like, listen, either you need 20/20 vision or you need glasses. And they're just trying to fit a lot into small spaces. But right above the film strip, you actually shows you what you're looking at. And in this instance, we're looking at my previous import, meaning the photos that I just imported. If you click it, you get a list of some of your most recent collections, and you can actually see all the photographs in your library. Or if you want to make sure you're just looking at the collection that you want to look at, you can go to your collections list and find the collection, in this instance, Lightroom Demo Winter 2022. It shows me how many photos are in my collection on the left-hand side. I click it and notice the information changes from previous import to the actual collection. So this is where you'll find the information of what you're actually looking at in your film strip. Over to the right-hand side of the film strip, I have some filtering options. And we're going to go through how to use these filtering options. These filtering options are how you control what you're looking at within your collection. All right, that's the library view. Now, I want you to click on Develop next. What Develop is going to do is show you by default the pictures individually. Now, I don't know if you remember that I told you don't delete the bad photos as you're taking them. This is where we decide what's good and what's bad, because we can see it bigger. We can see the photo, we can decide if it was in focus, if it was bad, so on and so forth. Down at the bottom, I can either use my mouse or I can click through and choose to sift through these shots. Depending on your computer and the processing power is going to depend on how long it takes the shot to load. You might see it blurry for a second and then it comes into focus. In this process, give your computer time. Don't get impatient. It's not an instant process depending on if you don't have the fastest computer or something like that. Now, for the light study, I actually would like you to show me everything that you shot. For projects further down the road, we're going to pick the best of. And I'm going to give you a number, and there's going to be a certain number that you're going to choose to turn in. So that being said, I just want to show you how do you delineate or designate a shot as that one's a good one and that one's a bad one. It's actually 2 letters on your keyboard. So how you delineate or designate a good shot, something that you potentially would maybe want to edit, it could potentially meet the final cut, is the letter P, as in pick, P. So when you're on a photo and you hit the letter P, you'll see a little quick, it's very quick, in the top of the photo, a little delineation that says flag as pick. It's actually at the bottom. So you hit the letter P in pick and it says flag as pick. And then also I said Lightroom loves to do things really tiny. On the thumbnail in the top left-hand corner, you're going to see a small flag, a small little white flag after you hit the letter P. That's also how you know that you've selected it as a pick. is that little small white flag on the thumbnail down at the bottom in the film strip. Now you've told it, okay, good to go. That's a good one. There is a way to completely just decide I'm not going to use this photo. That is the letter X on your keyboard. The letter X. What that does is set as rejected, and then I kind of graze the thumbnail out. Now, feel free to try that because, and this goes for everything in Lightroom, Lightroom is not permanent like the things you do. So you can always use Command or Control Z and undo, or you can always unpick. So you can click on the little flag in your thumbnail to undo the selection or the designation of picked or rejected. Or you can change your mind. And if you originally picked it, you can then just hit X to reject it, or you can hit P again to pick it again. So nothing is permanent. You can always change your decisions and get back to the original beginning state. Another power of Lightroom. Okay. So I just want you guys to like try it, like pick, reject, pick, reject, pick, reject. You know, you can even, it becomes pretty fast. And in your workflow, you start to build this up where it's like, oh, no, that's bad. Reject. Man, it's bad. Reject. You know what? I'm just going to reject that, reject that, reject that, reject that. Okay, let me pick this one. Let me reject this one. Let me pick this one. And notice I might be picking ones that are not 100% ready to go. There's another step in this process. I might need to edit these shots, but this is my first step in picking my selects. This is a multi-step process. So I just want you guys to see that in action, okay? Pick, reject. Now, say I picked a bunch of photos, boom, but I only wanted to now see the photos that I picked. That's where this filtering system comes in. And just above the film strip, there's a little drop-down arrow that says filters off. If you click that, it's to the right of the top right of the film strip. You click the little thing that says filters off and you say, the next option down says flagged. Now remember the icon to tell you that it's picked is a flag. So if you click the word that says flagged, notice my film strip changed. I only see the ones that are flagged. Again, this is not permanent. I can always go back and turn my filters off and it brings back the whole thing. So that's a way, it's one of the most powerful organizational tools in Lightroom. There's other ways to filter things with stars, with colors, with ratings. But right now we're just going to talk about pick and rejecting. Okay, we've got this far. We got our photos in Lightroom. I've given you a little preview of the interface. Oh, on the right-hand side, these are editing tools. Those pieces to the puzzle that I told you, raw files have individually packed into one file. You have sliders that let you access all of those things. We're not going to touch that panel today. We're going to come back to that. But what we are going to do from here is right now we have a bunch of files that, as I've defined, are not shareable. Like you can't email me all the files you shot for your light study. And if you did, it'd be like a big mess. I just have like a bunch of individual files. So what I want to show you guys is how to export these files to shareable files, sizes and types, and combine, say, 40 files individually into one file, a PDF. And that PDF is what you'll turn into me, where I can scroll through and see everything you shot and so forth. So that's the next step in the process after we're here in Lightroom, okay? We're gonna skip the editing process today. We're gonna act like we edited the photos. And with Light Study, you're gonna act like you edited them. I don't want you to touch it, editing. I just want you to give me what you shot. So there's a process to do that. So that's what we're gonna do next. But before that, I want to take a quick break because I've been talking straight. And I know this is a lot. Those of you that have your camera on, you're like, what the hell is this? This is crazy. Your brain is exploding. So I want you to take a break. We're going to take a 15-minute break. It's 4:50. We'll come back on at 5:05. We'll give you a full 15 minutes. And then I'll walk you through going to export the files and combine them into a PDF that you turn in for class. Okay? All right, let's take a quick break. 5:05, we'll come back. I'll see you in a second. Okay, so to pick up where we left off, we imported we took our photos from our memory card to our hard drive. We organized them based on folder structure. We opened Lightroom and we imported those photos. The process is called import. We're not actually moving the files anywhere. We're just referencing where they are. And we're telling Lightroom where that reference is. And we're building an organizational folder structure within Lightroom for those references. This referencing is important to note that what Lightroom is doing, because if you disconnect the location where the photos are, say you take out your hard drive, you rename the folder, you rename the file names. After you do the import, so basically after you've created the referencing within Lightroom, Lightroom's not going to know where anything is, and it's actually going to tell you that. It's going to be like, I can't find the file. Fortunately, there's a way to relocate if you end up doing this. If, say, you end up renaming a folder, and it could be any folders within the sequence. If you rename the parent folder, that throws everything off. So the reason why we try to do the folder naming in an organization before is so that you don't run into that issue in Lightroom where you've renamed stuff, reorganized stuff, and then like it's not there. The other big thing is if you like say move the files completely, like take them off the hard drive, put them somewhere else, or unplug your drive. If you unplug your drive, obviously you won't be able to tell Lightroom where your files are. But if you rename the folder, you can re-explain to Lightroom where the files are. If you run into that issue, we'll tackle that issue when you get on that issue, like when you arrive to that issue. So I just wanted to reference that. Okay, so now we're here. We have our files in our film strip. We're going to imagine that we've already done like our selections and we've edited them. We've maybe picked the ones we want. But right now we have a view where we're showing everything. And in this instance, in this view, what we want to do is what I want you to do is select everything. You see this view right now that we have here, and it's a grid view, and I can see everything. I can be like kind of peruse what I shot in the center. This is something that film photographers used to do before you pay for, say, like all your photos to be developed and printed really big. Because you wouldn't want to like pay and develop your shots and pay for a messed up shot, right? So there needed to be some way that you could review it and you could say, oh, let me select that one, that one, that one. And you would tell the developer, go ahead and print those. So there's two parts to what you're going to be turning in. One of those parts we're going to make right now, and that's called a contact sheet. And that's what I've been describing. Contact, C-O-N-T-A-C-T, contact sheet, S-H-E-E-T, 2 words, contact sheet. we're gonna make a context sheet, and the context sheet shows everything you shot, the good, the bad, and the ugly. As we move forward through the quarter, you'll see assignments have a minimum photos shot and then an amount of photos selects turned in. So the minimum photo shot is gonna be sometimes 30, sometimes 60, sometimes 100, but the only way I can tell how many photos you shot is if you create a context sheet. This is something unique to this class. It's you might not create context sheets anymore outside of this class, but it's just something where I can see your effort with the shots. So in order to create a context sheet, we want to include everything on that context sheet. So we're going to select all. A quick way to select all is Control or Command A on your keyboard. And what that does is it selects all the photos within the collection. So we're going to select all the photos. All right, once we've selected all the photos, on the top in our options where library, develop, map, book, slideshow is, we're going to go to the option that says print. Top right-hand corner of our window. Print. And once you open print, you're going to see a variation of things in the middle. You might see a grid, you might see one. The important thing is that everything is still selected. On the left-hand side, I'm going to close these so we start out in the same base. On the left-hand side here, you're going to see the word template browser. You want to open template browser, and then you're going to see the word Lightroom templates. And then in Lightroom templates, you're going to go to the 4x5 context sheet. So again, template browser, Lightroom templates, 4x5 context sheet. Once you select that, if you have all of the shots selected down below, it's going to show you a preview of what one page of your context sheet will look like. Based on the number of photos I have, it's telling me that this is going to be 3 pages of this grid. And so we've built the context sheet. Now we need to save it. So on the right-hand side, the only option that we're going to mess with is print job. Print job. Now, one good thing about Lightroom is it remembers a lot of the actions that you do. So we're going to set some settings here in print job. And next time you come back on a different project, it should remember what you did, so you don't have to set these settings again. But to get it to where it needs to be, under print job, we're going to select the words print to. And we're going to select JPEG file. The other thing that we're going to select is file resolution. And we're going to bump this resolution down to 72 PPI. Now, we'll go into more depth about file resolution, but just know 72 PPI is a standard for photos or raster graphics that you're not going to be printing on physical paper. What it also does is it helps you bring the file size down. The more resolution you have, the bigger your file. So we're gonna do 72, and we're gonna bring the quality to about 60 or 70. Right here in this slider, JPEG quality. All of these settings are with the idea that we want these files to be small as possible for this part, for the context sheet. Because the context sheet doesn't need to be high resolution or high quality. I just need to see how many photos did you try to shoot in this project? Yes, Joey.
So my file names are really long for some reason. Can I turn them off when I submit it? Or?
You're talking about right here in this grid?
Yes.
Yes, in layout style, or actually I think it's in layout, just layout. I believe, wait, where is it? Is it under page? Yeah, page, under page, uncheck photo info. Yeah. Good question. So JPEG file, 72 DPI, 60 to 70%. And then we're just gonna hit print to file. Now, we need to organize our stuff still. So I know I'm about to create 3 new files because this told me it's one of 3 pages. So where do I put these files? I need to put these files in the project folder. So if Finder opens for you like this, really small, go ahead and click this drop-down arrow to make it bigger. The drop-down arrow is next to the folder. And then find the project folder. All right, I'm in the project folder. However, these are not raw files, so I'm not going to put them in the raw folder. What I am going to do is make a new folder called exports. And then within exports, I'm going to make a folder called contact sheet. Again, I'm directing myself. This is something I'm exporting, and the specific thing it is the contact sheet. I'm going to add a name to my files. Now, for naming conventions, I always want it to be your first initial, actually your first name, your last name, and then the name of the project. And then in this instance, I'm going to add contact sheet onto the end of it, so I know that this is my contact sheet. Okay. And then you're going to hit save. Your progress bar is going to come up in the top left-hand corner again. Depending on how many photos you have will depend on how long this takes. Could be a process. Okay, see, mine's still going. It's processing really large files and making them really small. But to show you the final result, I'm going to go to my Finder and then go to my project folder. And here you go. Page 1, page 2, and I guess page 3 is still thinking. But these are my contact sheets. We're going to leave these here for now. This is part of what we'll turn in with our final project, or our final version of this. And we're going to go back to the develop menu. So even though it's still running, you can move around and do things. So I'm going to go back to the develop menu. And I still have everything selected. This is unique for the light study. Normally you would filter and only select your flagged photos. or filter even further and select the ones you've rated or the ones you've added colors to, and then do this process. But for the light study, it's unique in that I want you to export large versions or large shareable versions of all the photos that you shot. So we're going to select all again, Command or Control A. We're going to use our secondary click like we did in Adobe Bridge. We're going to use it again here. Secondary click on the film strip after you select all. And then we get this menu that pops up. This process that we're about to do is exporting the files into shareable files. So we're going to go to the word export, and then we're going to slide over and click on the word export. So again, I gained this menu from right-clicking on my selection, which is down at the bottom of the film strip. I select it all using Control or Command A on my keyboard. And then I right-click on that anywhere on my selection, and I get a pop-up menu, and I go to Export and to Export. That opens a new window. So what we're about to do in this process is set the settings. We're going to tell Lightroom how small to make our files. And we're also going to tell Lightroom where to put our files. And we're also going to tell Lightroom what to name our files. So we're going to start with the location. Where do we put our files? So up here in the top left-hand corner, I want you to select hard drive. Top left-hand corner, select hard drive. Again, good thing is Lightroom's going to remember this. So there's parts of this process that you won't have to do again, and other parts that you'll need to change because those steps in the process are unique to whatever grouping of photos you're exporting. I want everybody to close all of your options here so that we can go through them one by one together. And if you're doing this when you're rewatching the video, do this. Close all of them so you are looking at something similar to my screen. The first thing we're going to open is the first thing at the top. We're going to go from top to bottom, and that's export location. This defaults to something different than specific folder. So what I want you to do is hit the drop-down menu and select the option called specific folder. Then it's going to ask you basically what folder. And so we need to tell it. So I'm going to hit the word choose, and I'm going to do what I've done 2 other times in this process. I'm going to find my project folder. Okay, here's my project folder. And here's the exports folder. I've already exported a contact sheet, but this is exporting something different. This set of photos that I'm exporting are the rest of the photos, the rest of the files. So I need to name a folder a little bit differently for this. So I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this 72 PPI because that is the resolution that I'm going to use to export these shots. It'll make more sense because eventually we're going to be exporting photos to print on a printer, and your PPI needs to be larger. But in this instance, these are the 72 PPI shots. What does that signal? What should 72 PPI signal to you? It should signal that these are the files small enough to be emailed and shared, but not big enough to be printed. So if you need to add that into the folder name, just so you remember what 72 is related to, 72 PPI is for digital sharing.
Can the person later change that if they want to print it out or no?
Not from these files. We have to then redo this process and export a different batch at a different resolution.
If we save it as if we wanted to print it out, would the quality change a lot? Or
Yes.
why are we saving it like this?
This is a smaller file size with less pixels.
Oh, okay.
Digital screens only require 72 pixels per inch to see the whole image and understand it. For printing, we need more pixels per inch, but what comes with having more pixels per inch is having a larger file size.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
And so we will export an entirely different batch when we are printing at 300 PPI. And I'm giving you a little preview. The other number for printing, and you might have heard this if you've taken maybe a screen printing class or maybe some other graphic design class. The standard for printing raster graphics is 300 pp or dpi. They're kind of interchangeable, those terms, pixels per inch or dots per inch. It's just generally our eyes, when something's printed, need 300 pixels per inch to see it properly. But on projected light screens, which we're all looking at, we only need 72.
Okay.
So in order to fit within a file size for uploading for emails, we just need to set it to 72. It kind of brings everything down. There's another thing that controls quality, and that's dimension. This is separate from dimension, and we're going to set the dimensions here in a second. But this is determining how many pixels we're working with per inch. So if you need to put a little note in the folder so you remember that 72 is related to digital sharing, then do that. So we've created that folder, and this is where we're going to put our exports, and then we're hit choose. I want you to uncheck, this is important, uncheck put in subfolder. Just uncheck that. Uncheck put in subfolder. We just created this subfolder within the project folder. We manually created it. So uncheck it. By default, it's checked. You won't have to uncheck that again. It's going to stay unchecked. Okay. We've decided the location. Now we're going to name our individual files. Every file is going to get a name, and we're going to tell Lightroom what to name it. So I want you to go ahead and check this section here called Rename To. Open up File Naming, Rename To. And I want you to select the drop-down option, Custom Name Dash Sequence. Then we're going to have an option here. We're going to set the start number to 1, and we're going to name our photos. Our naming conventions repeat themselves. So first name, last name, project name. The reason why we're repeating the names is so that we can always go back and find this stuff. It gives you an example of how the file names, the individual file names are going to look. It just annotates that number at the end of it, and it has the file extension of .jpg. So told it where it's going to go and named the files. Every time you do this, these two sections will change because it's a different project and it's a different file name. File settings is the next section we want to go to. Now, again, our goal is that we have manageable files that can be emailed, that can be uploaded, and it doesn't take too long. You don't run into any issues. So because of that, we're going to actually bump our quality down just a little. And this is just a little hack that I use to make sure that my files are, manageable in file size. And I've done everything that I can do to make sure that they're manageable. So we're just going to bump it down to 80%. Next time you come back to this window, that's still going to be 80%. It remembers the last thing you did. Now, the last section that we're gonna mess with is the dimensions. Now, I mentioned to you, when you're dealing with a raster graphic, an image, you have resolution, which is how many pixels per inch, and you have dimension. They go together to make the quality of the shot. So I'm gonna give you a number that's a pretty decent dimension, width and height. Pretty decent on average for the screens that you'll be looking at it on. So that dimension, what I want you to do is check resize to fit, select width and height from the drop-down arrow, and then in the width, type 1920. 1920. And in the height, leave it blank. So if there's something there, just hit delete so that it's blank. And in the resolution, we named our folder 72. We're gonna actually set our resolution here at 72 pixels per inch. Now, because we're dealing with digital, you want to make sure that these drop downs are set in pixels, not inches. Inches don't correlate to digital files. Pixels do, because our screens are made up of these squares of color and light called pixels. So we measure our height and our width with pixels. It's like how we measure inches and we measure feet in physical space. Okay. All right. Export location, decided the location of our files. Rename the file to custom name dash sequence, gave it a custom name. Use dashes and not spaces in my file name. Repeat my naming convention from the folders I've created previously. First name, last name, project name. You could even add in the file name, if you want to give it extra identification, 72 PPI. So you know without the shadow of a doubt, before opening this file, that this is a 72 DPI file. You won't make the mistake of taking this and trying to print it. Okay, identifier. It's called a unique identifier. We've added unique identifiers to our file type, our file names. Cool. Unique identifier added. Our size is determined. Our size has two delineations, resolution and dimension, width and height. We've determined our width. The computer is going to decide based on the width what the height should be. And our resolution is 72. It won't distort it. It's going to do it properly and proportionally. And we've bumped our quality down a little bit to 80. Okay. We're going to hit the blue button down at the bottom, export. You're going to see a progress bar at the top left. Now, depending on how many photos, how much your computer is doing at that time, will depend on how long this export takes. Mine's chugging through it. So I'm going to go to the folder to show you the final result. Digital sharing, and here are the photos being one by one populated as Lightroom processes them. You can see the naming convention here, and the sequence automatically grows. Joy.
After image sizing, we can export it after that? After we finish
Image sizing was the last thing.
Okay.
Where you control the width, height, and resolution. Yeah. Once the progress bar is done, it's done and you'll have all your shots. Now, right now I have 53 shots. You guys might have some 40 shots or whatever. It's still not ready to be turned in because this is like a mess, like it's a bunch of individual files. But my files are much smaller. We started with files that were 50 megabytes. And this photo is now, we can see the information here, 515 kilobytes. It's less than a megabyte. It's over 50 times smaller. But if I show you the photo, it's big enough for you to see it. It's quality enough. But this wouldn't be big enough to print. It would look really bad. So what I've done is given you some generalized numbers that help file size, but also I can still see it. I can still see what you did with the camera. It's really big. It's not as small as a contact sheet, but it's not the really huge photo that can be printed and put on the wall. We've come down in between. It's easier to manage, et cetera, et cetera. If I look at the total size of this folder, just to give you an idea, the total size of this folder, all 53 photos, is less than the original size of one photo, of one RAW. The total size of this folder is 43 megabytes. The original one photo RAW file was 50 megabytes, just for one. So we're in a much more manageable space right now to share these files. Now, last step. This is where Adobe Acrobat comes in. What I want to do is combine all 53 of these shots, combine the 3 pages from my contact sheet, and combine my little write-up explaining my process, or in your guys' case, explaining your findings in your light study. I want to put that into one document that will, in the end, have about, what, 53 plus 3 plus say it was 2 pages, about 60 pages. One document, one PDF that then you can send, and on my end, I get one document with your first name, your last name, and the project name, .pdf. I open it, I see all your shots, I can scroll through, I see your contact sheet, and I can read your write-up. So how do we do that? We use Adobe Acrobat to do that. So the last step in this process is opening Adobe Acrobat. When you do that, when you open Adobe Acrobat, you're gonna see a window that shows maybe all the PDF files on your computer, but you're going to go to a section called Tools. So we've opened Adobe Acrobat Pro, not Adobe Acrobat Reader, Adobe Acrobat Pro. We've opened Adobe Acrobat and we're gone to the section that says Tools. Top left, Home and Tools. And then we're going to come down to the section that says Combine Files, C-O-M-B-I-N-E, Combine Files, right here. Combine Files. It's a little purple paper looking icon. When you click that, a new window opens with a big blue button that says Add Files. So go back a little bit. Tools, let me close this. Open Adobe Acrobat, go to Tools, and then click on Combine Files. Once we do that, we get this window with this blue button that says Add Files. This is where we're going to put anything that we want to combine into this Acrobat document. So we're going to hit Add Files. And a familiar window in this process, you're going to get very familiar with your Finder, your Explorer windows. I'm going to find my project folder and go to the folders that I want to add. So first, I'm going to go to my exports folder and I'm going to go to my contact. Well, no, I'm going to add my shots. So I want to select everything in this folder. Again, you can do the shortcut Control or Command A on your keyboard, or you can click the first one, hold Shift, and click the last one. Once you have everything selected, add files. Boom, your files will start to come here. I'm going to go back to this button up top here that says Add Files because I want to add more files. So I'm going to hit Add Files, and then this time I'm going to go back out to my Exports folder, and I'm going to click on my contact sheet. And I'm going to add all 3 pages of my contact sheet as well. Those get added down here after my shots. There's one more thing that you want to add. That's your write-up. Now, say you wrote your write-up in Pages, Word, Google Sheet, Google Doc. Export that or save as that write-up as a PDF. there's the option. All of those programs have that option to save that write-up as a PDF. Once you have that write-up, you want to add the PDF into this as well of your write-up. So I'm going to go back to add files, and I'm going to find my write-up. Now, in this instance, I didn't do a write-up, so I'm just going to find a random PDF, my resume. I'm going to use that, and I'm going to add that. So you can see a PDF being added as well. Boom. My PDF, my resume, that's hypothetically your write-up. So if I scroll through here, we're about to add all 353 photos individually on their own page, individually. We're about to add the contact sheet that we created from Lightroom, and we're about to add the write-up. So in this window, one thing to remember, if anything's out of order, you can rearrange it. You can just drag and drop it into a different place. So like if your time is out of order or the way you want your light study to be displayed in order, you can rearrange it here and you can put things in their place. So then you're gonna hit combine. Down at the bottom, you're gonna get a progress bar. Now, depending on how many files or how big the files are, it's going to decide how long this is gonna take. Don't know why mine is taking so long. Shouldn't take this long, but we'll give it a second. Okay, boom. You might see some check marks run across, letting you know the progress is moving faster. Mine didn't show any, it just finished it. So on the left-hand side here, there's a little icon that looks like papers stacked on top of each other. If you click that, you can also see the pages within your PDF. And you can scroll through them and you can add new pages if you missed some, or you can delete some, or you can rearrange them here in the page section here as well. But as you can see, as I scroll through, I have every individual shot. So if you think of my end now, I'm reviewing what you shot for your project. And then I get to the contact sheet. Okay, you shot more than 30 photos. And then I go and I read your write-up. Now look, my resume is more than one page. It should have put all the pages here, but might not have. Oh no, this is the one page resume. Okay. Okay, so we have all our pages here. Okay, now what do? This is your file. This is what you're going to turn into class for your project. This is the file that you want to turn in. So we need to save it. So there's a couple more steps in the process, and then this process is ready to be uploaded. My computer, I don't know, that file is being funky, so let me give this a sec. Okay, we're going to go to File. Jeez. We're going to go to Save as Other. So just write this step down. File, Save as Other. And we're going to do one more thing that's going to help our file size get really compressed and just really easy to just send. We're going to do File, Save as Other, Reduced Size PDF. File, Save as Other, Reduced Size PDF. When you do that, you're going to get a pop-up window. That window is going to tell you you can't save a reduced file size PDF until you save a regular size PDF. So you're just going to hit yes. And from this point on, I want you to hit whatever the positive option or the actionable option is of any pop-up window that comes up from this point on. That's yes, that's save, that's overwrite, that's go ahead, that's whatever the positive or the actionable option is of the choices given you in pop-ups. I want you to choose that choice. So in this instance, we're going to hit yes. And then here's our lovely Finder window again. I'm going to find my project file and my export folder. And right in my export folder, I'm going to place my final submission file. I'm going to name my file, keeping the file extension .pdf. I'm going to name my file, again, repeat the naming convention. My first name, my last name, and the project name. And you can add the unique identifier of final if you want after you put that stuff in there. Most important thing, first name, last name, project name, .pdf, okay? But you can add the word final there, and then you can hit, and make sure you have .pdf there. Okay, and we're placing it in the project folder in the export folder. Then you're gonna hit save. It's gonna save the file and reopen a window. So remember, hit the positive action of any pop-up windows that pop up in this process. This is do you want to reduce the file size? You're gonna hit okay. And then you're not gonna type anything else in this window, and you're just gonna hit save again. It's gonna ask you if you would like to replace the file. Yes, because what we just did was we created and saved a regular PDF, and now we're gonna overwrite that file that we created and save a reduced size PDF. So you're just gonna hit replace. You're gonna see a progress bar down here in the right-hand corner. And when the file is done, you're gonna have a final PDF in your project folder, in the exports folder, properly named, ready to go to upload to Canvas. And that's how you turn in your files. Now, the part in all of this process we skipped is any processing of our photos. We didn't do any processing. We didn't adjust color, hue, saturation. We didn't make the exposure different. We didn't edit our shots. We just kind of skipped that. I want you to skip that for the light study, okay? And then to show you the final file, here it is. Here's the PDF. And here's the PDF with all of the shots, including the contact sheets and the write-up, which that file that I loaded is kind of corrupted. So this file, which is now 23 megabytes, it's small enough to be emailed, but it's also a decent enough file size that you can upload to Canvas without too much hassle. This is the file that you upload to Canvas. All right, so I know that process is a lot. I know everybody follows along at different speeds. For that reason, I'm giving you till next week to turn in your light study project. Like this. That's part of your homework. So what also gives you more time is to rewatch this lecture if you need to, follow the things that you missed, any steps that you missed in this process. And the other thing that I would like you to do, and I'll have it in Canvas, is do some research about something called depth of field. Depth of field. You might have seen this term in your photographic triangle research. And you are going to be shooting in the instructions. You'll see that I request you to shoot a couple things. And so you'll pick up your camera this week again. So for homework, what we'll be doing is finishing the light study out by going through this process that I went through in class today, because I know everybody follows along at different speeds. And then you will also be doing some introductory research and discovery on depth of field, and then also some shooting in relationship to depth of field. So that'll be your homework for this week. Paula, go ahead.
I just have one quick question about the write-up. So I'm a little bit confused on because I wrote something about the pictures that I took, but not really a lot. I just kind of talked about how the lighting changed. But did you want us to do research and write a page, or what exactly was?
I'm usually pretty straightforward with what I want you to do in the write-up. So if you did that, then that's what's required for that particular project. So
Okay, cool.
anytime that I want you to do more or research, I'll be pretty specific.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Mhm.
Do we not have to worry about raw files then? Like making raw files or shooting raw?
You will need to worry about that, but
Okay.
not until next week.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
But if you want to get ahead of it and you have a different camera than a Canon camera, and you didn't see CR2 files or camera raw files, you saw JPEG files,
Mhm.
Google how to shoot raw files with your camera name.
Okay, we'll do.
And it'll show you where it's literally just a setting in the menu that you
Okay.
change. Yeah. But it will really come into play when we really dive into our shooting project next week. We're going to want it to be able to access colors and shadows, highlights, and all those things. Yeah. The most important thing this week is you get a grasp of this organizational of processing, importing into Lightroom, and then also start to discover depth of field. And then you're actually going to do some practice or some experiment shots with depth of field. And yeah, so I'll send all of those instructions in Canvas. I will, when this video processes, it's a long one, I'll upload it, which will also take a little while to upload to YouTube, but I will then send that link over as well. And then you should have all the information to complete the homework I'll get that done by Friday. But hopefully before, I just need to get this video processed and uploaded. Any other questions? All right, this is always a little hump that we have to get over, getting through this program and the initial processes of explaining all of the thought processes that go behind this. But once we get past this, we can really dive into being creative and how do we create. And we'll come back. You might have hiccups with this process. You might have hiccups with, little things, like disconnecting your hard drive or renaming folders or something like that. But we'll come back and we'll tackle those problems once they arise. So yeah, thank you everyone for being so diligent with this. Hopefully you were able to follow along at least partially, and then hopefully by me re-uploading or submitting this video and sending you the YouTube link, you'll be able to then at your leisure follow along, fast forward, rewind, or whatever it might be with this. So yeah, if there aren't any other questions or concerns, does anybody have anything else? Cool. Thank you. Hopefully you guys have a good rest of the week. And once I send my messaging through Canvas, if you have any questions, please message me and let me know. And if not, I'll see you guys next week.
I just have a quick question.
Yes.
Are we meeting in campus next week or Zoom?
So next week will be Zoom. The school is reopening on the 3rd, which happens to be, Wednesday. But I am actually out of town on the 3rd. Actually, sorry, the 3rd is Thursday. So the school doesn't even reopen until after we meet. So it actually doesn't even matter the amount of time. What we'll do is on the 9th is the first official day that we're allowed to meet. Is on the 9th. So what I'll do is I'll take a poll of the class, how many people would like to meet in person on the 9th, get that poll. Based on that poll, we'll decide if we're going to do an in-person meet on the 9th.
Cool. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, actually, that was the last thing I wanted to tell you guys. So thank you for asking that question because that was on my mind. I forgot to tell you that. So, all right, cool. Thank you guys. We'll chat next week. If you have any questions, please contact me.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you
talk
so
soon.
much.
Thank you.
Good week.
Bye.